Kethver checked his plasma rifle one more time as the transport ship moved through hyperspace. The weapon hummed with energy, its blue glow reflecting off his dark armor. He had carried this rifle through 17 battles across the galaxy. Each victory was marked by a small scar on the weapon's side. The Velthari warrior was tall, even by his species' standards. His skin was thick and gray, covered with natural armor plates that could stop most small weapons. His forearms moved with practiced ease as he prepared his equipment. Two large eyes sat on the sides of his head, giving him perfect vision in all directions. Around him, other Velthari soldiers did the same checks. They moved in silence, as warriors should. No wasted words, no fear. They had trained for this. Their entire lives, the mission briefing had been simple. A human colony on Kepler 442b was under attack by the Zephyrian horde. The insects had swarmed the planet 3 days ago. Most colonies would be dead by now, but somehow this one was still sending distress signals. Kethver had heard of humans before, but never fought alongside them. They were new to the galaxy, having only discovered faster-than-light travel a few decades ago. Most species took centuries to develop such technology. The humans had done it in less than 100 years. Still, being fast learners did not make them warriors. Kethver had seen their files. Humans were small and weak compared to most galactic species. They had no natural armor, no enhanced strength, no special abilities. They lived short lives and died easily. The transport captain's voice echoed through the ship, approaching drop zone. All teams prepare for deployment. Kethver stood and walked to the deployment bay. Other species were gathering there too. He saw a few crystalline Shardani, their bodies made of living crystal that could cut through metal. There were also some gas-breathing Nethmori in their environmental suits. Then he saw the humans. They were even smaller than he had expected. The tallest one barely reached his chest. Their skin looked soft and pink with no natural protection. They wore simple metal armor that looked primitive compared to his energy-resistant plates. One human approached him. The creature's hair was black and short. Its face was marked with small lines that showed age and experience. "You must be Kethver," the human said in accented galactic common. "I am Captain Hyungwoo Park, human marine commander." Kethver looked down at the small being. "Yes, I have read your files. You have been fighting the Zephyrians for 2 days now." Captain Park nodded. "We have. They hit us hard and fast. Most of our heavy weapons are gone, but we still have people down there who need help." Another human joined them. This one was younger and smaller than the captain. "This is Lieutenant Wonji Kim," Captain Park said. "She knows the colony layout better than anyone." The lieutenant stepped forward. Her dark eyes met Kethver's gaze directly, which surprised him. Most smaller species looked away when facing a Velthari warrior. "The survivors are in the underground shelter network," she said. "About 300 people, including civilians." "From other species?" Kethver processed this information. "What is your defensive capability?" "Limited," Captain Park admitted. "We have small arms, some explosives, and a lot of determination." The Velthari warrior almost laughed. Determination meant nothing in real combat. Only proper weapons, tactics, and training mattered. These humans clearly did not understand modern warfare. The ship shuddered as it entered the planet's atmosphere. Through the windows, Kethver could see smoke rising from the surface. Large sections of the main city were on fire. Black shapes moved through the streets below, the Zephyrian horde. "Drop in 2 minutes," the captain announced. Kethver activated his personal shield generator. The energy field would stop most projectile weapons and provide some protection against plasma fire. Around him, the other Velthari did the same. Blue energy surrounded each warrior like a second skin. He noticed the humans had no such protection. Their armor was purely physical, metal plates and ceramic inserts. It might stop primitive bullets, but Zephyrian bioweapons would cut through it like paper. "Are you not concerned about energy weapons?" Kethver asked Captain Park. The human smiled, showing white teeth. "We make do with what we have. Always have." The transport doors opened with a loud hiss. Wind and smoke rushed into the bay. Below them, the landing zone was a cleared area near the colony's edge. Kethver could see Zephyrian movement in the surrounding buildings. "Go, go, go!" "Captain!" Park shouted. The Velthari warriors jumped first, their heavy armor allowing them to drop from greater heights. Kethver hit the ground hard, his legs absorbing the impact easily. His shield flickered as debris bounced off it. The humans came down next, using rappelling lines to control their descent. They moved quickly but carefully, covering each other. As they reached the ground, Kethver noticed they immediately spread out and took defensive positions without being ordered. Plasma fire erupted from the nearby buildings. The Zephyrians had been waiting for them. Kethver brought up his rifle and returned fire, his shots precisely placed to maximum effect. Beside him, other Velthari did the same. The humans reacted differently. Instead of standing and fighting from fixed positions, they moved constantly. They used cover, rolled behind obstacles, and popped up in unexpected places. Their weapons were simpler than his plasma rifle, projectile weapons that fired metal bullets, but they used them with surprising skill. A young human soldier dove behind a broken wall near Kethver. The being's armor was already scorched from near misses. "Private Sang-Ho Lee," the human said, introducing himself even in the middle of combat. "You should stay behind the main force," Kethver told him. "Your armor cannot protect you properly." "Private." Lee grinned. "Maybe not, but I can still fight." A Zephyrian bio-grenade landed near their position. Kethver's shield would protect him, but the human had no such defense. Without thinking, Private Lee threw himself toward the explosive device. Trying to kick it away from the group, the grenade detonated early. The blast threw the young human against a concrete barrier. His armor cracked and smoke rose from the damaged plates. But the explosion had been far enough away that it only wounded him instead of killing. Everyone nearby, Kethver stared at the injured human. In all his years of combat, he had never seen a soldier deliberately move toward an enemy explosive. It went against every survival instinct. Every tactical doctrine he knew. Captain Park and Lieutenant Kim reached Private Lee quickly. They checked his wounds and applied medical supplies with practiced efficiency. "You did good, Sang-Ho," the captain said. "Real good." The young human smiled despite his pain. "Just doing my job, sir." Kethver helped them move Private Lee to a safer position. As he did, he found himself studying these strange creatures more carefully. They fought with primitive weapons and had no natural defenses. Their tactics were unorthodox and their equipment was basic, but they had done something no Velthari warrior would do. They had chosen to protect others at personal risk, even when those others were aliens they had never met before. The landing zone was now secure. But this was only the beginning. The real mission lay ahead in the colony proper, where hundreds of beings waited for rescue in underground shelters. As they prepared to move out, Kethver found himself wondering what other surprises these humans might have in store. The colony looked like a war zone. Buildings were broken and burned. Streets were filled with debris and scorch marks from energy weapons. The smell of smoke and death hung in the air like a thick blanket. Kethver moved forward with the combined team. His enhanced vision picked up movement in the shadows between buildings. The Zephyrians were still here, hunting for survivors. The insect creatures were patient predators, willing to wait for the perfect moment to strike. Captain Park held up his hand, signaling the team to stop. He pointed to a large crater in the middle of the street. "That used to be our command center," he said quietly. "They hit it first, took out our communications and heavy weapons in one strike." Lieutenant Kim checked her handheld scanner. "I'm picking up movement about 2 blocks ahead. Looks like a patrol group, maybe 8 to 10 hostiles." The Velthari tactical doctrine was simple in such situations. Advance with overwhelming force, eliminate all enemies quickly, and secure the objective. Kethver expected the humans to follow his lead as the most experienced warrior present. Instead, Captain Park turned to the entire team. "Ideas?" This surprised Kethver. A commander should give orders, not ask for suggestions. But the humans seemed to expect this kind of discussion. "We could circle around," suggested Private Lee, who was still walking despite his injuries. Take them from behind while they're watching the main approach. Or create a distraction, added another human, Corporal Jinwoo Nam. Draw them toward US while another team moves past. Lieutenant Kim studied her scanner again. There's an old maintenance tunnel that runs under this section. We could split up, send half the team through the tunnel while the rest provides cover above ground. Kethver listened to this discussion with growing confusion. These humans were suggesting complex tactics that required precise coordination between multiple teams. Such plans often failed because of communication problems or timing errors. The simple, direct approach was usually better. The tunnel plan has merit, Captain Park decided. But we need to know if it's clear first. Without being asked, 2 human soldiers volunteered to scout the tunnel entrance. They moved quickly and quietly, checking for traps or enemy presence. Kethver watched them work together, covering each other's movements with practiced ease. The scouts returned after 10 minutes. "Tunnel's clear," reported Sergeant Mi Young Choi, the team medic. "But it's tight. The big guys might have trouble." She looked at Kethver and the other Velthari. "We will manage," Kethver said. He was curious to see how this human plan would work. The team split into 2 groups. Half would take the tunnel, while the others created a distraction above ground. Kethver chose to go with the tunnel team, wanting to observe the humans more closely. The maintenance tunnel was indeed tight. Kethver had to duck low and move carefully to avoid hitting his head or shoulders on the walls. The humans moved through the space much more easily. Their smaller size an advantage here. As they crawled through the dark tunnel, Kethver found himself next to technical specialist So Young Park. She was working with some kind of electronic device, its screen casting a faint blue glow. "What is that?" Kethver asked quietly. "I'm tapping into the colony's sensor network," she whispered back. "Most of it was destroyed, but some underground systems are still working. I can give us a better picture of where the enemy forces are located." Kethver was impressed despite himself. The device she was using looked like it had been built from spare parts, but it was accessing systems that should have required expensive military equipment. Above them, they could hear the sound of weapons fire as the distraction team engaged the Zephyrian patrol. The plan was working so far. They emerged from the tunnel near the entrance to the underground shelter complex. The massive metal doors were still sealed, which meant the people inside were probably still alive. But Zephyrian warriors were positioned around the entrance, waiting for the doors to open. Lieutenant Kim counted the enemies through her scope. 12 hostiles, various positions. They have the entrance completely covered. "Standard assault formation?" asked one of the Velthari. "Warriors." Captain Park shook his head. "Too much risk to the civilians if stray shots penetrate the door. We need to be more careful." He pointed to different positions around the area. "Jinwoo, can you get to that maintenance shed with your explosives?" "So Young, that communications tower would give you a good overwatch position." Myung set up a medical station behind that concrete barrier. Each human was given a specific task that played to their individual strengths. Kethver realized this was very different from Velthari tactics, which relied on uniform warriors following identical procedures. The attack began with Corporal Nam detonating a small explosive device near the far edge of the enemy position. The blast created noise and smoke, drawing the attention of several Zephyrian warriors. At the same moment, Specialist Park began jamming their communications from her elevated position. The insect creatures suddenly found themselves unable to coordinate with each other. The Velthari warriors moved in with precise plasma fire, targeting the confused enemies. But Kethver noticed the humans were not trying to match their firepower. Instead, they focused on supporting each other and protecting the civilians. When one Zephyrian broke through their line and charged toward the shelter entrance, it was Private Lee who intercepted it. The young human was still injured from the earlier explosion, but he threw himself at the creature anyway, buying time for others to respond. The battle was over quickly, but Kethver had observed something important. The humans had not tried to prove themselves as individual warriors. Instead, they had worked as a coordinated unit, each person contributing what they could do best. Captain Park approached the shelter entrance and activated the communication. System. This is Captain Park, Human Marines. We're here to get you out. A voice responded from inside, speaking in multiple languages. There were humans inside, but also Velthari civilians, Shardani refugees, and others. The colony had been a diverse community before the attack. As the heavy doors began to open, Kethver saw faces looking out at them. Relief, hope, and gratitude were clear in their expressions. An elderly Velthari female stepped forward first. "Thank you," she said in heavily accented Galactic Common. We thought no one would come." Captain Park smiled at her. "We always come. That's what we do." The evacuation began immediately. There were more survivors than expected, over 400 beings of various species. Many were injured or weak from days of hiding without proper food or medical care. Sergeant Choi set up a medical station and began treating the wounded. She worked on anyone who needed help, regardless of species. Kethver watched her carefully bandage the crystalline arm of a young Shardani. Even though touching the living crystal could cut her hands if she was not careful, the evacuation would take time, and time was something they did not have much of. Zephyrian reinforcements would be coming soon. The team needed to move all these people to the extraction point before the enemy could organize a major attack. But as Kethver looked at the mixed group of survivors, he began to understand why the humans had been willing to take such risks. These were not just military objectives or statistical casualties. They were individual beings with families, hopes, and dreams. The humans seemed to see each refugee as someone worth saving, not just a mission parameter to complete. For the first time in his military career, Kethver found himself thinking about warfare in a different way. The situation was worse than anyone had expected. 400 survivors was far more than the original extraction plan could handle. The transport ships were already at maximum capacity with the military teams, and there was no way to fit everyone. Safely, Kethver studied the tactical display that Specialist Park had set up using salvaged equipment. Red dots showed Zephyrian positions surrounding their location. The enemy was closing in from 3 directions, and their numbers were growing by the hour. "The extraction point is compromised," Lieutenant Kim reported after checking her long range. "Stanner, heavy Zephyrian presence. They're waiting for us there." Standard military procedure was clear in such situations. Extract the most valuable personnel first, then return for others if possible. The humans and other military personnel would have priority. Civilians would be secondary, especially alien civilians who were not part of the mission parameters. Captain Park gathered the team leaders for a quick conference. "Options?" he asked, just as he had done before. "We could try fighting through to the extraction point," suggested one of the Velthari commanders. "Leave the wounded and elderly behind too." "Move faster," Kethver nodded agreement. It was the logical choice. "The civilians will slow us down significantly. Without them, we could reach the extraction point in 2 hours." Captain Park looked at the group of survivors. There were children among them, elderly beings who could barely walk, and wounded who needed constant medical attention. "How many would we have to leave behind?" "Maybe half," Lieutenant Kim calculated. "All the seriously wounded, anyone who can't keep up with military pace, and the very young or old." The captain was quiet for a long moment. Around them, human soldiers continued caring for the refugees. Private Lee was sharing his rations with a group of hungry Shardani children. Sergeant Choi was teaching a young Velthari how to apply bandages to his injured parent. "No," Captain Park said finally. "We don't leave people behind." "Sir," Lieutenant Kim said carefully, "the tactical situation is not good. If we try to move everyone, we might lose them all. Then we find another way." Kethver was confused by this response. The human captain was choosing an option that put everyone at greater risk. It went against basic military logic. "There might be an alternative," Specialist Park said, looking up from her improvised computer system. "I've been scanning the old colony infrastructure. There's an abandoned mining facility about 3 kilometers north of here. It has a working communication array that could reach our ships in orbit. 3 kilometers through hostile territory with 400 civilians," one of the other Velthari officers pointed out. That is essentially impossible. Not impossible, Captain Park said, just very difficult. Kethver studied the route. On the display, the mining facility was on the other side of a Zephyrian-controlled industrial zone. The path would take them through narrow streets, past multiple enemy positions, and across open ground where they would be exposed to attack. Even if we reached the facility, Kethver said, we would have to hold it long enough for extraction ships to arrive. That could be hours. Then we hold it for hours, Captain Park replied simply. The plan that emerged was unlike anything Kethver had seen in his military career. Instead of a standard combat formation, they would move in multiple small groups. Human soldiers would escort mixed groups of civilians, providing protection while maintaining mobility. The Velthari warriors would form a heavy combat unit, engaging enemy forces directly to draw attention away from the civilian groups. The Shardani, with their natural crystal weapons, would provide long-range support from elevated positions. It required perfect timing and coordination between species that had never worked together before. There were dozens of ways it could go wrong. Why? Kethver asked Captain Park as they prepared to move out. Why risk everyone for civilians who are not your responsibility? The human captain checked his weapon and looked back at the group of refugees. Because they're people, he said. That makes them our responsibility. The first part of the journey went better than expected. The human soldiers moved their groups quickly and quietly through the damaged streets. They used their knowledge of urban combat to find routes that avoided the heaviest enemy concentrations. Kethver watched. Private Lee leading a group that included elderly Velthari and wounded Shardani. The young human was still injured from the earlier explosion, but he never complained or asked for help. When an old Velthari female could not keep up, he simply picked up her bag and continued walking at her pace. You are slowing the entire operation, Kethver told him during a brief rest stop. Private Lee looked back at the old female, who was sitting on a piece of rubble and breathing heavily. She has grandchildren waiting for her on the core worlds, he said. I'm not going to be the reason they don't see her again. Halfway to the mining facility, they encountered their first major obstacle. A Zephyrian patrol had set up a checkpoint in a narrow street that they needed to cross. There was no way around it, and the patrol was too large to fight without alerting every enemy force in the area. We wait for them to move, suggested one of the Velthari. That could take hours, Lieutenant Kim pointed out, and more patrols might arrive. Corporal Nam studied the situation through his scope. I might be able to create a distraction, draw them away from the checkpoint. Too risky, Captain Park said. If something goes wrong, you'll be cut off from the main group. Then I'll make sure nothing goes wrong. Before anyone could stop him, the young human slipped away from the group. Kethver watched through his enhanced vision as Nam moved through the rubble toward a position several blocks away from the checkpoint. 5 minutes later, a series of small explosions echoed through the industrial district. The Zephyrian patrol immediately moved toward the sound. Investigating what they thought was another military unit, the civilian groups crossed the checkpoint area quickly and safely. But Corporal Nam was now alone, being hunted by angry Zephyrians who knew someone had been setting off explosives in their territory. We should go back for him, Private Lee said. He knew the risks, one of the Velthari officers replied. The mission must continue. Captain Park was already moving. Myung, take the civilians to the rally point. Jinwoo's part of this team, and we don't leave team members behind. The rescue took an hour and cost them precious time, but they found Corporal Nam hiding in a collapsed building, surrounded by enemy forces. A quick strike by the Velthari warriors broke the encirclement and allowed them to extract him. As they continued toward the mining facility, Kethver found himself thinking about what he had witnessed. The humans had risked the entire mission to save one soldier. By Velthari standards, this was poor tactical judgment, but watching the expression on Nam's face when they pulled him out of danger, seeing the relief of the other humans when they knew their comrade was safe, Kethver began to understand that the humans were fighting for something more than tactical objectives. They were fighting for each other. The mining facility appeared ahead of them, dark and silent against the smoky sky. Getting there had taken most of the day and they were all exhausted, but they had made it with everyone intact. Now came the hard part, holding the facility long enough for rescue to arrive as they approached the entrance. Kethver realized that everything up to this point had just been preparation. The real test was still ahead. The mining facility was larger than it had looked from a distance. Massive concrete buildings surrounded open mining pits that disappeared into darkness. Heavy equipment sat abandoned where workers had left it when the Zephyrian attack began. Captain Park divided the group quickly. Civilians go to the main processing building. It has the thickest walls and the fewest entrances. Military personnel set up defensive positions around the perimeter. Kethver watched the humans work with growing respect. They had no advanced equipment, but they made the most of what was available. Specialist Park found the communication array and began working to get it operational. Corporal Nam started placing explosives at key defensive points. Sergeant Choi set up a medical station in the safest part of the main building. The communication system is damaged but repairable, Park reported after examining the equipment. Give me 2 hours and I can get a signal to the fleet. 2 hours. They needed to hold this position for 2 hours against an enemy that would soon discover their location and attack in overwhelming numbers. Lieutenant Kim climbed to the highest observation point and began mapping the surrounding area with her scanner. Multiple enemy groups moving in our direction, she called down. They know we're here. The first attacks came as small probing forces. Zephyrian scouts tested their defenses, looking for weak points. The Velthari warriors responded with precise plasma fire, driving them back each time, but Kethver noticed the humans fought differently. Instead of holding fixed positions, they moved constantly. They used the mining equipment as mobile cover, repositioning after each engagement, to keep the enemy confused about their actual numbers and positions. Private Lee had found an abandoned mining loader and somehow gotten it working. The massive machine was not designed for combat, but its thick armor plating made it an effective mobile shield. He used it to protect groups of civilians when they needed to move between buildings. That is not standard procedure, Kethver told him during a brief break between attacks. Private Lee grinned from inside the loader's control cabin. We don't really do standard procedure. We do whatever works. The young human was right. Nothing. The humans did follow normal military doctrine, but it was working. Their unconventional tactics were keeping the Zephyrians off balance and buying time for Specialist Park to repair the communication array. As the attacks intensified, Kethver found himself fighting alongside different human soldiers. Each one had their own approach to combat, but they all shared certain traits that surprised him. When his plasma rifle overheated during a particularly intense firefight, Private Dayun Shin immediately handed him her projectile weapon. She continued, fighting with just a vibroblade, never complaining about the disadvantage. Why did you do that? He asked her later. Your weapon is more effective than mine, she said simply. Makes sense for you to have the better tool. It made tactical sense, but no Velthari warrior would have given up their primary weapon so easily. Personal honor and glory were too important. Technical specialist So Young Park had found a way to hack into the facility's security systems. Ancient cameras and sensors throughout the area gave them early warning about enemy movements. But she had done it using equipment that looked like it had been built from mining tools and spare electronics. How did you learn to do this? Kethver asked, watching her work with the improvised computer system. You pick things up, she said, not looking away from her screens. When you don't have the best equipment, you learn to make do with what's available. The humans seemed to excel at adapting to difficult situations. They took whatever resources were available and found ways to use them effectively. It was a kind of creativity that Kethver had never seen in military operations. During a quiet moment, he found Captain Park checking on the civilians in the main building. The human commander was not just giving orders. He was talking to individual refugees, asking about their needs, making sure they felt safe. You spend a lot of time on non-essential personnel, Kethver observed. Captain Park looked at him with a slight smile. No such thing as non-essential personnel. Everyone here matters. But military efficiency requires focusing on primary objectives. Our primary objective is getting everyone home safely. All of them. Kethver watched the captain continue his rounds, speaking with elderly Valthari, young Shardani, and human children with equal attention and care. It was clear that he genuinely cared about each individual's welfare. The largest attack came near sunset. Zephyrian forces had been building up their numbers all day, and now they struck with everything they had. Waves of insect warriors poured toward the facility from multiple directions. The Valthari defensive line held, but barely. Plasma fire lit up the darkening sky as both sides exchanged shots. The humans moved between positions, providing support wherever it was needed most. Kethver saw Private Lee abandon his protected position in the mining loader to help evacuate wounded civilians from a building that had taken a direct hit. The young human ran across open ground under enemy fire, carrying an injured Shardani to safety. When Kethver tried to provide covering fire, his position was targeted by multiple enemy weapons. Plasma bolts scorched the air around him, and he was forced to take cover. Lieutenant Kim appeared next to him, dragging him behind a concrete barrier as enemy fire intensified. "You're hit," she said, examining a burn on his armor where a plasma bolt had partially penetrated his shield. "It is minor," Kethver replied, though the wound was more serious than he wanted to admit. "Maybe to you, but you're still bleeding." She applied a medical patch to the injury, working quickly and efficiently. "There, that should hold until Mi Young can look at it properly." Kethver stared at the human officer. She was half his size and had no natural armor, but she had risked enemy fire to help him. "Why?" "Because you're part of the team," she said, as if it was the most obvious thing in the world. The battle continued through the night. Zephyrian attacks came in waves, each one testing different parts of their defense. But somehow the mixed group of humans, Valthari, and other species held together. Kethver began to notice something important. When the humans were afraid, and they clearly were afraid, they didn't freeze or retreat. Instead, they seemed to fight harder. Their fear made them more determined to protect the others around them. During the worst moment of the night, when enemy forces nearly broke through the main defensive line, it was Sergeant Choi who rallied the defense. The medic left her safe position and ran to the front lines, helping wounded soldiers continue fighting and coordinating ammunition distribution. "Shouldn't medical personnel stay in protected areas?" Kethver asked. "Should, yeah," she replied, binding a wound on a Valthari warrior while plasma fire passed overhead. "But my people need help, so here I am." Her people. She meant everyone. In the facility, humans, Valthari, Shardani, and others. They were all her people. As dawn approached, Specialist Park finally got the communication array working. The first transmission to the fleet went out just as the largest Zephyrian assault began. "Fleet Command, this is Ground Team Alpha," she transmitted. "We have 400 civilian survivors at coordinates 7-7-Mark-12. Requesting immediate extraction." The response came back quickly. "Ground Team Alpha, extraction ships launching now. Estimated arrival time 90 minutes. Hold your position." 90 minutes. They needed to survive 90 more minutes, but as Kethver looked around at the humans preparing for the final battle, he realized they would find a way. These small, weak creatures had already accomplished the impossible, and they weren't done yet. The final attack was unlike anything Kethver had ever faced. The Zephyrians came not in organized waves, but as a massive swarm that covered the ground like a living carpet. Their chittering war cries filled the air as thousands of insect warriors rushed toward the mining facility. Among them moved something that made even veteran warriors step back in shock. A harvester, a bioweapon the size of a building, designed to process entire populations. Its massive form towered over the smaller Zephyrian warriors, multiple feeding tentacles writhing as it searched for prey. "Fall back to secondary positions," one of the Valthari commanders ordered. "Standard protocol against harvesters is strategic withdrawal." But Captain Park was already moving forward, not back. "Jinwoo, how much explosive do we have left?" Corporal Nam checked his remaining supplies. Enough to bring down a building, maybe two. Good, So Young. Can you map the harvester's internal structure with the facility sensors? Specialist Park's fingers flew over her improvised computer system. Getting some readings, but they're not clear. The thing is mostly organic, hard to scan properly. Kethver could not believe what he was hearing. You cannot be planning to attack a harvester directly. No ground force has ever successfully defeated. 1. Captain Park looked at the massive creature advancing toward them. Then will be the first. The plan the humans developed was insane by any reasonable military standard. Someone would need to get inside the harvester and plant explosives in its processing chambers. The creature's outer armor was too thick for external attacks to be effective. I'll do it, volunteered explosives expert Wu Jinkong. I know where to place the charges for maximum effect. The survival probability is essentially 0, Kethver pointed out. Probably, Kang agreed. But if I don't try, everyone here dies for certain. Lieutenant Kim studied the approaching swarm through her scope. We can create a distraction, draw most of the smaller Zephyrians away from the harvester. Give Wujin a clear approach. How do we distract several thousand enemy warriors? Asked one of the Valthari. Sniper Young Su-han was already setting up in an elevated position. By giving them something more interesting to shoot at, the distraction plan was as crazy as the main attack. Hung would position himself in the open, on top of the facility's highest tower, and begin picking off Zephyrian leaders with precision shots. The enemy would focus their attention on eliminating the sniper, leaving the harvester temporarily less protected. That position has no cover, Kethver observed. You will be exposed to fire from all directions. Han checked his rifle scope. One more time, that's the point. Can't distract them if they don't notice me. As the swarm reached the facility's outer perimeter, the plan went into action. Han began his sniper work, each shot carefully placed to eliminate Zephyrian officers and communication specialists. The effect was immediate. Hundreds of enemy warriors turned their attention toward his position. Explosives expert Kong used the distraction to approach the harvester from its blind side. The massive creature was focused on the main defensive lines, its feeding tentacles reaching toward the buildings where the civilians were hidden. Kethver watched in amazement as the human explosives expert found access points in the creature's underside and began working his way inside. It was like watching someone deliberately enter the mouth of a predator. The defensive battle raged around them. Private Lee had modified his mining loader with additional armor plating and was using it to ram smaller Zephyrian warriors. The machine was not designed for combat, but Lee's creative use of it was proving surprisingly effective. Sergeant Choi continued treating wounded soldiers even as the battle moved closer to her medical station. When enemy warriors broke through the perimeter near her position, she defended her patients with a medical scanner in one hand and a plasma pistol in the other. Should medical personnel be engaging in direct combat? Kethver asked, helping her drive back the attackers. Should wounded people be left to die? She replied, checking on an injured Shardani while keeping her weapon ready. Specialist Park maintained communication with both the sniper and the explosives expert while coordinating the overall defense. Her improvised equipment was being pushed to its limits, but she kept everything working through determination and creative problem-solving. High above them, Sniper Han continued his deadly work despite intense enemy fire. His position was taking hits from dozens of weapons, but he kept shooting. Each precise shot eliminated another enemy leader and kept the swarm's attention focused on him instead of the harvester. Inside the massive bioweapon, explosives expert Kong was placing charges in critical locations. His voice came through the communication system, calm despite the incredible danger he was facing. First set placed in the primary processing chamber, moving to the neural cluster now. How much time do you need? Captain Park asked. 5 more minutes to place everything properly. Then everyone needs to get clear. This thing is going to make a big explosion when it goes. But the plan was falling apart. Han's position was being overrun by flying Zephyrian warriors. The sniper had eliminated dozens of enemies, but there were too many of them. His weapon was overheating and his ammunition was running low. "Can't hold this position much longer," he reported. "They're getting too close." Private Dayun Shin made a decision that shocked everyone. She grabbed an armload of explosive charges and started climbing toward Han's position. "If you can't stay up there, I'll give you a reason to come down." "What are you doing?" Captain Park called after her. "Making sure Wu Jin has enough time to finish his job." Shin reached the tower and began setting charges around its base. When the explosives detonated, the entire structure would collapse, but anyone still on top would fall with it. "You need to get down now," she told Han through the communication system. "Still have targets to eliminate, not anymore. Get down or we all fall together." Han abandoned his position just as Shin detonated the charges. The tower collapsed in a shower of concrete and metal, taking dozens of Zephyrian warriors with it. But Shin didn't make it clear of the explosion. They found her in the rubble, badly injured but still alive. Did Wu Jin finish?" she asked. Weakly, "Final charges placed," came Kong's voice over the radio. "Everyone get clear. Big boom in 30 seconds. The explosion that followed was visible from orbit. The Harvester's death scream echoed across the entire colony as its bioengineered systems failed catastrophically. The massive creature collapsed, taking hundreds of smaller Zephyrians with it. The remaining enemy forces retreated in confusion, their command structure broken and their ultimate weapon destroyed. As medical teams worked to save Private Shin, Kethver found himself staring at the wreckage of the Harvester. No military force had ever successfully destroyed one of these creatures. But a handful of humans with improvised equipment and impossible courage had done what entire fleets could not accomplish. "How?" he asked Captain Park, the human commander. "Looked tired but satisfied. We had something to protect. That makes all the difference." In the distance, they could hear the sound of approaching extraction ships. Rescue was finally arriving, but Kethver realized that something had already been rescued, his understanding of what real warriors looked like. And they looked nothing like what he had expected. The rescue ships descended through the smoky atmosphere like angels from the heavens. Their engines roared as they settled onto the makeshift landing zones around the mining facility. Kethver had never been so happy to see extraction vehicles in his entire military career, but even as Salvation arrived, the humans continued to surprise him. Instead of rushing toward the ships for immediate evacuation, they organized the boarding process to ensure the most vulnerable survivors went first. "Wounded and elderly civilians on the first ships," Captain Park ordered. "Medical cases get priority." Sergeant Choi worked with the ship's medical teams to transfer the most seriously injured. Private Shin, still barely conscious from her injuries, during the tower collapse, was among the first to be loaded onto a medical transport. "Take care of our people," she whispered to Kethver as the medical team carried her stretcher past him. "Our people." She meant everyone, humans, Velthari, Shardani, and others. After everything they had been through together, they had become one unit in her mind. The evacuation took several hours. The transport ships could only carry so many passengers at a time, and there were over 400 survivors to move. During the waiting periods, the humans continued to care for the refugees, sharing food and water, providing comfort to frightened children, and helping the elderly stay warm. Kethver watched Private Lee sitting with a group of young Shardani, teaching them a simple human card game to keep them distracted from their fears. The young human's armor was cracked and scorched from the battles, but he seemed more concerned about the children's welfare than his own injuries. "You have been wounded multiple times," Kethver observed. "Should you not be resting?" "Private Lee looked up from the card game. "I'm fine. These kids have been through enough. If playing cards helps them forget about the scary stuff for a while, then that's what we do." Explosives expert Kong had survived his mission inside the Harvester, though he was covered in biological residue and needed extensive medical attention. Instead of complaining about his condition, he was helping other soldiers catalog the remaining equipment and ammunition. "We should document what worked and what didn't," he explained to Kethver. Next time we face something like this, other teams can learn from our experience. Next time. The human was already thinking about future battles, future opportunities to protect innocent people. There was no doubt in his mind that he would continue volunteering for dangerous missions. Technical Specialist Park was working with the ship's communication officers to send detailed reports back to Fleet Command. Her improvised equipment had performed far beyond its design specifications, and she wanted to share those innovations with other military units. The mining equipment modifications could be useful in other siege situations, she explained. The sensor integration techniques might work on different colony worlds. Even Sniper Han, who had nearly died providing covering fire from the tower, was already planning improvements for future operations. Need better ammunition for long-range work, he told the ship's weapons officer. And maybe some kind of portable shield generator for exposed positions. As the final transport prepared to leave, Captain Park did one last check of the facility to make sure no one had been left behind. Kethver accompanied him, still trying to understand these remarkable beings. "Why do you do this?" he asked as they walked through the empty buildings. "Your species is new to galactic civilization. You have no obligation to risk yourselves for other species civilians." Captain Park paused in the doorway of the main processing building, looking back at the place where they had sheltered hundreds of refugees. "Because someone has to," he said simply. "If we don't help each other, who will?" The flight back to the fleet gave Kethver time to think about everything he had witnessed. The humans had accomplished something that should have been impossible. They had not only survived against overwhelming odds, but they had saved everyone under their protection. More importantly, they had done it without abandoning their principles. No one had been left behind. No one had been considered expendable. Every individual life had been treated as precious and worth protecting. During the medical examinations aboard the flagship, Kethver found himself in the same bay as several of the human soldiers. The ship's medical officers were amazed by the extent of their injuries. All of them had been wounded multiple times, yet none had reported their conditions until after the mission was complete. "Standard protocol requires immediate medical attention for plasma burns," the chief medical officer told Private Lee. "Why did you not seek treatment?" "Other people needed help more," Lee replied, wincing as the medical scanner examined his injuries. "Mi Young was busy with the really serious cases." The medical officer, a Velthari like Kethver, looked confused. "But your species is more fragile than most. These injuries could have become life-threatening." "Maybe, but leaving wounded civilians without medical care would have been definitely life-threatening for them." It was the same pattern Kethver had observed throughout the mission. The humans consistently put others' welfare ahead of their own safety. They made decisions based on protecting the group rather than preserving themselves. The formal debriefing took place in the flagship's main conference room. Representatives from multiple species listened as Captain Park delivered his report. The successful destruction of a harvester had sent shockwaves through the galactic military community. "The key factor was adaptability," Captain Park explained. "We used available resources in unconventional ways and modified our tactics based on the specific situation." But your casualty rates were significantly higher than standard military operations," pointed out a Shardani commander. 17 wounded out of 23 human personnel. "Everyone survived?" Captain Park replied. "And so did all 400 civilians." "I consider that a successful outcome," the Shardani commander looked at his datapad. "But the resource expenditure was inefficient. You could have saved time and equipment by prioritizing military personnel and essential civilians." Captain Park's expression didn't change, but Kethver could see something harden in his eyes. "We don't consider any civilians non-essential. Every person we rescued had families, dreams, and the right to live." After the official debriefing, Kethver approached the human captain privately. "Your methods are very different from standard galactic military doctrine." "I've noticed that," Captain Park said with a slight smile. "Is that a problem?" "No," Kethver realized. "It is an improvement." The human captain studied him carefully. You fought well down there. Your people are impressive warriors. We are. Trained for combat efficiency and tactical superiority, Kethver replied. But we are not trained for what you showed me. Which is? Kethver thought about everything he had witnessed, the courage, the sacrifice, the determination to protect others at personal cost. We are not trained to care. Captain Park nodded slowly. Caring makes you vulnerable, but it also makes you stronger than you thought possible. As they prepared to part ways, the human offered his hand in the strange human greeting gesture. Kethver accepted it, feeling the firm grip of someone who had earned his complete respect. If you ever need someone to watch your back, Captain, Park said, you know where to find us. Walking back to his quarters, Kethver reflected on how much his perspective had changed in just a few days. He had entered this mission thinking humans were weak and primitive. He was leaving it knowing they possessed the kind of strength that his own people had never developed, the strength to fight not for glory or tactical advantage, but for the simple belief that every life had value worth defending. 3 months after the Kepler 442b mission, Kethver found himself back on the front lines. But this time, the situation was different. He was part of a new joint task force specifically designed to combine human and alien military units for maximum effectiveness. The mission was on Arcturus 7, a mining world where Zephyrian forces had established a major staging area. Intelligence reports indicated they were preparing for a massive offensive against the inner colonies. The task force's job was to disrupt their operations before the attack could begin. Kethver's unit included many of the same humans from the previous mission. Captain Park had been promoted to major and now commanded the entire human contingent. Lieutenant Kim had her own tactical unit. Sergeant Choi led the medical team. Even Private Lee was there, fully recovered from his injuries and eager to get back into action. Good to see you again, Lee said as they prepared their equipment in the transport bay. How's the new assignment treating you? Kethver had requested transfer to joint operations. Immediately after returning from Kepler 442b, his superior officers had been surprised by the request. Velthari warriors typically preferred to work with their own kind. But Kethver had written a detailed report explaining why human-alien cooperation was more effective than traditional methods. It is educational, he replied, checking his plasma rifle. The weapon now bore additional scars from several successful missions with human teams. This operation was larger and more complex than their previous encounter. The task force included not just humans and Velthari, but also Shardani crystal warriors, gas-breathing Nethmori in environmental suits, and even some of the peaceful plant-like Verdani who served as communications specialists. The plan was ambitious. Instead of a single large assault, they would conduct multiple simultaneous strikes across the planet. Each team would target different facilities, communication arrays, weapon depots, transport hubs, and command centers. Kethver's team was assigned to eliminate a Zephyrian bioweapon production facility. Intelligence indicated the insects were developing new strains of their combat organisms, possibly including improved harvesters. Sounds familiar, Corporal Nam commented, loading explosive charges into his pack. Think we'll run into another one of those big monsters? Hopefully not, Major Park replied. But if we do, at least we know they can be killed. The approach to the target was different from their previous mission. This time, they had proper military transport and full tactical support. Orbital reconnaissance provided detailed maps of the enemy facility. Communication with Fleet Command was constant and reliable, but despite the improved resources, the humans fought exactly the same way they had on Kepler 442b. They adapted their tactics to this specific situation, protected each other without regard for personal risk, and never considered leaving anyone behind. The bioweapon facility was heavily defended. Zephyrian warriors had established multiple perimeter checkpoints and patrol routes. The main building was surrounded by defensive barriers and automatic weapon systems. Standard assault approach would require significant casualties, one of the Velthari tactical officers observed. Perhaps we should request orbital bombardment instead. That would destroy any intelligence we might gather, Major Park pointed out. Plus, there might be prisoners inside. We go in quiet and careful. The infiltration took most of the night. Small teams moved through the defensive perimeter using stealth and misdirection rather than overwhelming force. Kethver watched the humans work with the same creativity and determination he had witnessed before. Technical specialist Park hacked into the facility's security systems, creating blind spots in their sensor coverage. Sniper Han eliminated guard posts one by one, his shots perfectly timed to avoid detection. Explosives expert Kong placed charges at structural weak points that would allow controlled demolition when the time came, but it was inside the facility. That Kethver truly understood how much the humans had changed his own approach to warfare. They found prisoners, dozens of captured colonists from various species who were being used as test subjects for new bioweapons. Standard military doctrine would have focused on completing the primary mission first, then extracting prisoners if time and resources allowed. Major Park immediately ordered the prisoner extraction to become the top priority. But sir, one of the Velthari officers protested, the bioweapon research data is our primary objective. The people are our primary objective, Park replied firmly. The data is secondary. The rescue operation was complex and dangerous. Many of the prisoners were injured or weakened from their captivity. Some had been infected with experimental organisms that required immediate medical attention. Getting them out safely would take time they might not have. Sergeant Choi set up a field medical station and began treating the most serious cases. She worked with creatures from species she had never encountered before, adapting her techniques to different biological systems. How do you know how to treat a Nethmori respiratory infection? Kethver asked, watching her work with the gas-breathing aliens. I don't, she admitted, carefully adjusting the atmospheric mixture in a damaged environmental suit. But I know how to treat lung problems in general, and these guys are having trouble breathing. Same basic principles, different biology. Private Lee had found a group of young prisoners who were too frightened to move. Instead of simply carrying them out, he sat with them and talked quietly until they trusted him enough to follow. It took longer than forcing them to comply, but it was gentler and more effective. Why spend time on psychological care? Asked a Shardani warrior. Physical removal would be faster. Because they're scared kids, Lee replied simply. Being fast doesn't help if we just make them more afraid. The data recovery mission continued simultaneously with the prisoner extraction. Specialist Park copied everything she could from the facility's computer systems, while Corporal Nam prepared demolition charges to destroy the remaining research. But as they worked, they discovered something that changed everything. The Zephyrians were not just developing new bioweapons, they were planning to use them against civilian populations across multiple star systems. The attack on the inner colonies would target schools, hospitals, and refugee centers. We need to get this information to Fleet Command immediately, the tactical officer said. This changes the entire strategic situation, agreed, Major Park said. But we finish the evacuation first. Sir, the data is time critical. Every minute we delay could mean what? That we leave these people behind to die so we can send a message 5 minutes sooner? Park looked at the group of rescued prisoners, many of them still receiving medical treatment. No, we save everyone first. Then we save everyone else. The extraction took another hour. By the time they were ready to leave, Zephyrian reinforcements were approaching the facility. The team would have to fight their way out while protecting dozens of weakened prisoners. It should have been impossible. But somehow, the humans made it work. They formed a protective convoy with the strongest fighters on the outside and the prisoners in the center. When enemy forces attacked, the humans rotated positions to keep fresh fighters facing the greatest threats. When ammunition ran low, they shared weapons and equipment without hesitation. Kethver found himself fighting not just alongside the humans, but like them. When a group of prisoners became separated during the fighting, he didn't calculate the tactical cost of going back for them. He simply went back because leaving people behind was no longer acceptable to him. The transport ships arrived just as their defensive perimeter was beginning to collapse. The evacuation was completed under heavy fire, with human soldiers covering fire until the very last moment. As they lifted off from the planet's surface, Kethver looked back at the burning bioweapon facility. They had destroyed irreplaceable enemy research, rescued dozens of prisoners, and gathered intelligence that would save countless civilian lives. More importantly, they had done it all without compromising their principles. No one had been left behind. No one had been considered expendable. "Good work down there," Major Park said, settling into the seat next to him. "Your people adapted well to the new tactics." "Your people taught us something important," Kethver replied. "We have been thinking about warfare in the wrong way." "How so?" Kethver thought about everything he had learned over the past months. "We focused on defeating enemies. You focus on protecting people. The second approach is more effective." "Major," Park smiled. "Protecting people gives you something worth fighting for. Makes all the difference." As the transport carried them back to the fleet, Kethver realized his transformation was complete. He was no longer the same warrior who had looked down on humans as primitive and weak. He had learned what real strength looked like, and he had learned that true courage was not the absence of fear, but feeling that fear and choosing to act anyway, especially when acting meant protecting others at personal cost. The humans had taught him that being afraid was not weakness. It was what made the fight worthwhile. 2 years had passed since Kethver's first mission with humans. The Joint Task Force program had expanded across the galaxy, becoming the most effective military organization in known space. Other species were beginning to adopt human tactical approaches, though few could match their natural ability to fight for others rather than themselves. Kethver now held the rank of strategic coordinator, responsible for training new mixed species units. His office aboard the fleet command ship was filled with reports from successful operations across dozens of star systems. Each mission had saved lives, protected civilians, and demonstrated that cooperation between species was more powerful than any single military force. But today was different. Today he was writing his final report. The door chimed, and Major Park entered. The human had been promoted again and now wore the insignia of a fleet tactical advisor. His face showed the lines that came from years of making difficult decisions, but his eyes still held the same determination Kethver had first seen on Kepler 442b. "Heard you were putting in for transfer," Park said, settling into the chair across from Kethver's desk. "Back to regular Velthari units?" "No," Kethver replied, saving his work and turning to face his friend. "I am retiring from active military service." Park raised an eyebrow. "You're not old enough to retire. What's the real reason?" Kethver gestured to the stack of reports on his desk. "I have been reading mission summaries from the new training units. They are learning the tactics, following the procedures, achieving the objectives. Sounds like success to me. They are missing something essential." Kethver stood and walked to the window that looked out over the fleet. Hundreds of ships from dozens of species moved in coordinated formations. They understand how to fight like humans, but they do not understand why humans fight. "And you think you can teach them?" "I think I can try." Kethver turned back to his friend. "The Galactic Council has approved my request to establish a training academy. Not for tactics or weapons, but for the principles that make human military doctrine effective," Park smiled. "A school for learning how to care about people? A school for learning that fear is not weakness, that protecting others gives meaning to sacrifice, and that no individual life is expendable." Kethver picked up a data pad from his desk. "I have been documenting our experiences. All of them. Starting with that first mission when I thought humans were primitive and weak. And ending with? Ending with the understanding that you taught me what it truly means to be a warrior." Park stood and extended his hand in the human gesture of friendship. "It's been an honor serving with you, Kethver. The galaxy is lucky to have someone like you teaching the next generation." As they shook hands, Kethver reflected on how much had changed since that first meeting in the transport bay. He had been so certain of his superiority, so convinced that military efficiency was about eliminating variables and following proven procedures. The humans had shown him that the most important variable was the one most military doctrines ignored: the willingness to sacrifice everything for people you barely knew, simply because they needed help. 3 weeks later, the Academy opened on a neutral world near the galactic core. The first class included young officers from every major species: Velthari, Shardani, Nethmori, Verdani, and even a few humans who wanted to understand their own methods better. Kethver stood before them in the main lecture hall, looking at faces that reminded him of his own younger self. They were confident, well-trained, and completely unprepared for what they were about to learn. You are here because your military commands recognize that human tactical doctrine has proven superior to traditional approaches, he began. You expect to learn new weapons techniques, battlefield strategies, and command procedures. The students nodded, taking notes on their datapads. You will learn none of those things, Kethver continued. Weapons and tactics are tools. They are useless without understanding why you fight. A young Velthari officer raised her hand. Sir, we fight to defend our territories and protect our species' interests. No, Kethver said simply. You fight to protect people, all people, regardless of species, regardless of whether you know them personally, regardless of whether they can offer you anything in return. He activated the holographic display system and began showing images from various missions. Humans carrying wounded aliens to safety. Human medics treating patients from species they had never encountered before. Human soldiers sharing their rations with refugee children who spoke different languages and worshiped different gods. Humans fight because they are afraid, he explained. They are afraid of a universe where the strong prey on the weak, where individuals are sacrificed for efficiency, where people are abandoned because helping them is inconvenient. A Shardani student looked confused, but fear is a weakness. It impairs judgment and reduces combat effectiveness. I thought the same thing once, Kethver admitted. Then I watched a human soldier throw himself on an explosive device to protect aliens he had never met. I saw humans risk impossible odds to save people who could not help them win the battle. He told them about Private Lee and his willingness to sacrifice himself for others, about Sergeant Choi treating patients while under enemy fire, about Major Park refusing to leave anyone behind, even when it made the mission more dangerous for everyone. Fear motivated all of these actions, he explained. Fear of losing people they cared about, fear of failing to protect the innocent, fear of living in a galaxy where no one helped each other. Over the following weeks, Kethver took his students through simulated scenarios based on real missions. But instead of focusing on tactical efficiency, he emphasized the human approach. Protect everyone, leave no one behind, and treat every individual life as precious. The results were remarkable. Students who had been trained to think in terms of acceptable losses and tactical priorities began to develop the same protective instincts that made human units so effective. A young Nethmori officer named Vashtal approached him after one particularly difficult simulation. Professor Kethver, I am struggling with the evacuation scenario. My tactical training says we should prioritize the most valuable personnel and abandon the wounded who slow us down. What does your conscience say? Vashtal was quiet for a moment. That the wounded need our help more than anyone else. Then follow your conscience. Tactics serve conscience, not the other way around. 6 months into the program, Kethver received a visit from Fleet Admiral Zorthek, one of the highest-ranking Velthari officers in the galactic military. The admiral toured the academy and observed several training exercises. Your students are performing well above standard military benchmarks, the admiral noted. But their methods are highly unconventional. Some of my officers are concerned about discipline and proper procedure. With respect, Admiral, proper procedure led to the Kepler 442b situation where 400 civilians were nearly lost because no one was willing to risk military assets to save them. Admiral Zorthek consulted his datapad. Your human allies saved those civilians with 17 wounded out of 23 personnel. Those casualty rates are unacceptable by normal standards. Everyone survived, Kethver replied. All 23. Military personnel and all 400 civilians. I consider that perfect success. But the resource expenditure was irrelevant. You cannot calculate the value of a life in terms of resources expended, the Admiral studied him carefully. You have changed significantly since your first encounter with humans. Your psychological profile indicates a complete shift in military philosophy. Yes, I learned that being a warrior means more than being good at killing enemies. It means being willing to die to protect people who cannot protect themselves. That evening, Kethver sat in his quarters working on his memoirs. The book would be a complete account of his experiences with humans, from his initial skepticism to his current understanding of what real courage looked like. He had titled it, When I Battled Beside Humans and Learned What Fear Truly Is. The final chapter was the most difficult to write because it required him to admit how wrong he had been about everything. He had thought courage meant being fearless, that strength meant being able to dominate others, that military success meant completing objectives with maximum efficiency. The humans had taught him that courage meant acting despite fear, that strength meant protecting those weaker than yourself, and that military success meant everyone going home safely. As he wrote, Kethver thought about all the students who would graduate from his academy and serve in mixed-species units across the galaxy. They would carry with them the lessons he had learned from humans, that every life had value, that no one should be left behind, and that true warriors fought not for glory but for love. The final words came to him as he watched the stars through his window. I have fought beside the greatest warriors in the galaxy. I thought I understood what made a soldier. Then I fought beside humans and learned that sometimes the smallest, most fragile beings carry the largest hearts. They taught me that fear is not weakness. It is what makes us fight for something bigger than ourselves. They showed me that the strongest warriors are not those who feel no fear, but those who feel it deeply and choose to protect others anyway. If you want to know,